Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the moderator of the next session, Žantovský.
Thank you very much. Should I start? Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We have a session with a slightly provocative topic, and the topic is there a road to a legitimate peace in Ukraine that would be in conformity to the international order? And for that topic, I have, I think, four very competent speakers. And let me now invite to the stage Evelyn Farkas, who's the executive director of the McCain Institute, and I will use this opportunity to pay a little tribute to the late Senator McCain, who was a friend to this country, to many of us, and to many other European countries.
Sorely missed.
Yes, we will have Karin von Hippel, who's the chair of the Arden Strategies Defense and Security Company. We will have, we couldn't do without a Ukrainian speaker, of course, so we have Yehor Cherniev, who's the deputy chairman of the National Security Committee of the Verkhovna Rada in Ukraine. And although many of you don't speak Ukrainian, you all know that Verkhovna Rada is the Ukrainian parliament. And last but certainly not least, we have Miroslav Wlachovský, a Slovak diplomat, former ambassador to Denmark, former ambassador to the United Kingdom when we served together, and most recently the former foreign minister of Slovakia. And to briefly introduce the topic before I leave the floor to the speakers, I have been long of the mind that what Putin is doing is waging two wars. Not just a war against Ukraine as a sovereign country, but also a war against the international order as it has existed since the end of the Cold War in 1989, in part since the end of the Second World War in 1945, and in some respects since the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. You know, the principle of a sovereignty of a country, of inviolability of its borders and its territory, and of the freedom of choice for every sovereign country to arrange for its domestic affairs and for its political system as the people of that country will decide, are the crucial principles of international orders. And we see them all violated in the Russian aggression against Ukraine. So in speaking about a possible peace, you know, you can imagine all ways, all kinds of peace, and most of them would be very humiliating types of peace for Ukraine, and all of them would be in violation of the international order. So the question is there any hypothetical possibility for a peace that would be both legitimate and acceptable to Ukraine and to the international community in this struggle? And of course, to try to answer that question, I have to start with Yehor and his perspective of the possible ways to peace?
Well, it's not an easy question, you probably know, and we try to understand how to find this balance between that what can be acceptable for Ukraine and not violating of the world order and international law. You know, just let me remind you from what this war was started. Putin in December 2021 requested to NATO allies that they should withdraw from the Western Europe and push the borders of the NATO to 1997. This is the goal of this war. This is the goal of war that started revising the world order. It's not only about Ukraine. So when we are talking about the peace deal, peace negotiation, we have to have in mind that this is the real goal of Putin. It's not about 4 regions of Ukraine, but also about this for Ukraine first of all. And I can assure you that Ukraine is ready for peace negotiation, but not for any price. We have not so many points that we need in these peace negotiations. So first, any limits of our sovereignty, because we see all these requests from our Russian side that our army should be limited, our weapons should be limited, some interference in our internal policy, like special status of Russian language or something about Russian church or Russian culture, etc. It's unacceptable to us, definitely. Second, we will never recognize those territories that now under occupation as a part of Russia. It's actually would be a violation of international law, recognition of these territories as a part of Russia. And third, we have to have some solid security guarantees. This is 3 points that we need for acceptable peace negotiations from our side. But I have doubts that Russia is ready for this because, again, the goal of this war is not only the territory of Ukraine or just a control on Ukraine. That's why we will see. That's why they are playing for time and just to try to convince the U.S. that they are still in the negotiations, but they are not, because they launch more and more missiles, drones on our territory. They're trying to move forward on the battlefield, and there are no signs that Russia is ready for this. So we can discuss some points of the future peace negotiations, but it doesn't matter because it's existential war for Ukraine, and this is the existential war for Russia, and they are just not ready for any negotiations.
All right. We'll come back to that, but let me now go to Evelyn to get the point, to get the view from the other side of the pond. I mean, some of your top politicians see the road to peace in Ukraine as easy. It will give up territory, it will give up its ambitions to join NATO or the European Union, it will reduce the size of its armed forces to a couple of parade battalions, and there will be peace. Is this something that would be acceptable or palatable to most Americans?
It's completely unrealistic, and it would not be acceptable to most Americans. One thing that I know Yehor probably meant to mention, but the last piece of any kind of durable peace would be accountability, because remember, Russia has also violated human rights to a degree that we have not seen since World War II, or maybe since they were active in Syria and before that Chechnya. So the way that they have waged this phase of the war, so from the full frontal invasion in 2022, has been an assault on also human rights, the Geneva Conventions, et cetera. A durable peace, let's face it, must ensure that Ukraine is not invaded again by Russia. And I think most Americans understand that. And most Americans also understand that if you want a peace soon, and if you have to do it with Vladimir Putin, there's probably some kind of compromise where Ukraine does not forfeit its territory de facto, or rather de jure, but de facto perhaps has to make some kind of deal with Russia, where Russia remains on the territory of Ukraine until later in the future, when that can be renegotiated, when that can be changed. But in exchange, Ukraine must have, I think what Ukraine needs more than anything else, what is existential to Ukraine, is the survival of the Ukrainian state and the Ukrainian people, which means a security guarantee. And that is where we get into some trouble, because at the current moment, the U.S. administration doesn't seem willing to provide a bilateral security agreement or guarantee to Ukraine. And the question of NATO membership also seems to be not just in the United States, and that was also the case under the Biden administration, but also in other NATO capitals, not something that the countries are ready to commit to. Although I would argue that in Europe, there's more of a willingness to do so. And frankly, we should all understand that we want Ukraine with their phenomenal military capability on our side, not on the other side. I remember I was in Ukraine, I don't know, like 3 weeks ago, and one of our Ukrainian interlocutors said, you were talking about how capable we are. Remember, if the Russians capture us, we will have no choice. We will have to use our military against you. So I think there are the seeds of a deal in the making. There is a realistic proposal, which is the one that I just sketched out. It's not perfect for Ukraine, but as long as they have the security guarantee, as long as there's some accountability for the human rights violations, then we can proceed, and European stability can be reasserted to a degree. But if Vladimir Putin stays in the Kremlin, we still have a problem in Europe and globally.
All right. Karin, how is the think tank community and the experts community seeing this?
Well, if I could just add on to what Evelyn was saying, I think it's, there's a lot of challenges, as we all know, because America isn't willing to provide security guarantees right now. And NATO membership may not be on the cards right now, but I think the Europeans can do a lot in terms of accelerating accession to the EU. I think, in a sense, the Friends of Ukraine can do a lot for helping Ukraine with kind of insurance policy. So helping it get on the road to the European Union, which would help with governance issues. As Evelyn said, I think Ukraine will have the strongest military in Europe after this war, and so that military will be helping all of us. They have incredible technology, as we all know. And so, yes, it's up to the Ukrainians to decide what's acceptable or not. None of us can tell the Ukrainians what they should agree to, and Donald Trump can't tell the Ukrainians what they should agree to, but we can all try to help, in as many ways as we can, and I think we're doing that. And I was impressed yesterday, even when the Czech Prime Minister said that, together in Europe, we're 10 times as strong as Russia. And I think, the Europeans need to be more confident about what they can do. Ukraine doesn't need actually the types of weapons they were asking for in the beginning. They've moved so far that a lot of the support that they need is it's a lot of it, obviously it's missile defense, et cetera. But they've done so much in terms of drones and stuff. So it's actually more now financial assistance. It's accelerating a lot of the innovation that they're already doing. And that isn't impossible. I think we can all do that together.
Right.
I'm not sure about the think tank community, though, but
the question is about being together. You're right that this country has so far been very solid in supporting Ukraine and the common European stand or the need for it on this, but that does not apply to all European countries. And there are some that are wavering to a smaller or a lesser degree, some that are prioritizing its domestic concerns over the need for the support for Ukraine, and some even which are somewhat more understanding of Putin's thinking and Putin's goals than we are. And I'm sorry, Miro is a close friend, for putting you on the spot, but would you care to elaborate on how united we are in this and what needs to be done?
Okay, but I will come back to how you framed the debate at the beginning, that Putin is waging two wars, one against Ukraine, one against the international order, and I agree with that, even though I think that the latter preceded the former. I mean, the war against the international order started much earlier, and we have to go back at least to 2007 and to his Munich speech, when he clearly defined, and we didn't believe him, and we didn't listen to him enough, and we didn't stop him when there was a time, and he is testing how far he can go. And if I'm not mistaken, Russia is the only country which extended its territory in the 21st century by violent means.
So far.
So far. Well, hopefully it will be not followed. But if we will not put a wall to this, it might be followed.
Saddam Hussein tried, and we stopped him.
Yeah.
He took Kuwait, and we pushed him back.
Yeah, but that was in
1991.
So not in 21st century, in 20s.
Ah, you're right. Sorry.
So I'm talking about this particular century and how it started and where we will let it go. So I think Vladimir Putin is representative of a revisionist regime, very clearly with a neo-imperial agenda, who wants to extend the territory, who made it clear, as you mentioned, that we should push NATO into the borders of 1997, which is totally unacceptable to countries which joined after 1999. Let's be clear about it here. And he is using all of his toolbox against the West, and he is in the war with the West. Because I think hybrid war is also a war, and we are not defending ourselves enough, or we didn't start early enough, and that's part of the problem, because already due to this hybrid threats, and we've been weakened, and that's the answer to your question, Michael, how united we are. I think in 2022, he was surprised, and maybe even European Union member countries were surprised how united we were, because he considered that, okay, the West is weak, we are not able to defend ourselves, and we will definitely not be united. But he was mistaken with Ukrainians, and he was mistaken with the West. So that gives us a chance and gives us a hope that we can stand to Putin. He's not a genius. He's not a fantastic strategist who thinks 12 steps ahead. It's not true. It's a myth. It's a myth.
All right. Okay, we have several aspects of the topic that emerged during your contribution, and but I suppose the bottom line is that the chances to reconcile the minimum needs for Ukrainian sovereignty are with Putin's declarations and ambitions, our goals are unsurpassable. Yeah, I mean, a peace in theory can only be achieved if the maximum concessions on one side overlap with the minimum requirements of the other side, and this simply is not the situation here. One thing I would like to draw your attention to is you all spoke about the need for security guarantees, and I agree in principle, but security guarantees is not what you can expect to get in any negotiation from Russia, because in reality you need the security guarantees from third parties, yeah, be it NATO, be it Europe, be it some other structure. So my question, and it would be to Yehor, is could Ukraine attain peace with Russia, getting back its territories, getting back its sovereignty without such security guarantees, you know, deciding to rely on its own resources? It's been said here that it will be one of the most capable and most modern armies in Europe, if not the most capable army in Europe at the end of the conflict. Then I think it was Evelyn who raised the question of accountability. That's something that I did not quite took into account, but it's true. I mean, there were war crimes committed, there were crimes against humanity committed. So can there be peace without putting Putin on trial? That was an unintended pun, because the buck stops with Putin. So in any resolution of accountability, you know, there's no way to avoid that person. And it's true what you said, Miro, about the first war starting before the second war, and that is a question to all of us, which we largely avoid. Are we at war with Putin? Because Putin says he's at war with us. Absolutely. And you can't, you know, not be at war with someone who's at war with you, right? So if we are at war with Putin, what does it compel us to do? Please. Yehor.
Okay, there are a lot of points you raised. You know, the situation in Ukraine now can be described by a quotation of Golda Meir, former Prime Minister of Israel, who was born actually in Kiev. Mm-hmm. She said that we want to live, our neighbors want to see us die. So there are no so many options to survive. So this is like our situation with Russia. They just won't eliminate Ukraine as a nation. That's why they are asking for so unacceptable points in their conditions for peace. And one of these conditions, actually, limitation of our army. It's a preparation for a new wave of aggression in a year, 2 years, 5 years, doesn't matter how many, but they will come back if Ukraine would not have a solid security guarantees. So, back into your question, what can be these security guarantees? Well, I understand that it's not up to us. It's up to our partners and member states in NATO to invite or not invite. But it's on our agenda still, and we see it as a first and foremost and the most solid security guarantee is the membership in NATO. Second, yes, we are welcoming the initiatives of some European countries to send the troops to Ukraine with the boots on the ground as a part of these security guarantees. And third, of course, it's our army that should not be limited, and the support of our military industries also should not be stopped even after the end of this war, because we have to have a strong army even after the ceasefire and after the peace agreement.
All right, but it's two different things. You know, if you say to the Russians, we will accept peace, provided that we get back our territories, without any preconditions. Yeah, we will accept peace. And that means we are free to do as we wish in arranging for our defense, because that is the right of any sovereign country under Article 58 of the Charter of the United Nations. You don't have to ask for this, you know. And the other thing is we will not accept any limitations on our cooperation with other countries, on our building of the military. We're not asking you to do that. You don't ask us to do that, yeah? It's, you know, any peace that would be real peace has to be peace between equals, right? And you are an equal, and in our mind, you are an equal to Russia. Yeah.
Can I just
Karin.
jump in? I just want to build on what Miro was saying earlier. It's not just, I mean, of course, they can sign a deal, but nobody trusts that the Russians will implement anything, right? They won't abide by anything that they sign. But I think what we can also do beyond supporting Ukraine as much as we can, given the limitations, is push back on the Russians everywhere else. So the Russians are interfering in Europe. They're arson attacks. They're trying to kill their own people. There's cutting cables in Europe. They're in Africa. If we kneecap them everywhere else, at the moment we're not. We're just kind of watching it. We're not pushing back on Russia and all these other places. And I think the more we try to limit what Russia is doing globally, the better it would be for Ukraine as well in the longer run.
Yeah.
Yeah, basically, they are going after us, and we are not going after them. And the game is that we have to do it. We have to start to defend our interests everywhere in order to push him back.
And I will add that it's even more important today because we see Washington kind of standing back. And so Europe needs to say, this is urgent. This is not sabotage. This is an attack, you know, on a military base in Czechia, you know, or a military base where Americans are in Germany.
Absolutely.
You know? I mean, people need to call things their real names.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, in effect, it's a zero-sum game.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, not necessarily, but I do think if Vladimir Putin stays in the Kremlin, that's why you need all these guarantees, because there might be a Russian leader someday who is not imperial and is willing to recognize that Ukraine has the right to exist. But if you have to make a peace deal with Vladimir Putin, which is the reality today, then you are going to have a security agreement, security guarantee.
Now, the security guarantees, the security agreements, and we are about halfway through, so we now also opening the floor to the questions from the audience, and there are some questions on the Slido, but you're also free to raise your hands and ask questions from the floor. But if you do, please holler or something, because I don't see very well. But before we start with the question, and I see our first questioner, there is already one on the Slido. The first question: how do military cooperation programs change Ukraine's status in the global security system? I mean, in the real world, there is not much chance to win unanimity within NATO for the inclusion of Ukraine. You know that, we know that. You know, this country would vote for tomorrow, but it takes 32 countries now to vote for it, and we don't have that. So in the absence of full membership, can the military cooperation programs, can maybe the presence of NATO countries training personnel in Ukraine, etc., at least for some time, replace or support Ukraine sufficiently?
Well, I think Ukraine is rewriting the rules of the waging of war, because we developed a lot of things that became a game changers, like drones or sea drones, and we destroyed 30% of Russian fleet by having nothing as a fleet of Ukraine, and by the sea drones, and the same with the air drones, and we also use robotics, the land drones. Of course, cooperation can change the cooperation with the Western world, and you know, it can benefit both sides. Of course, we need these joint ventures with your companies that produce, for example, air defense. We cannot produce air defense yet, or missiles to this air defense, but we can produce almost everything that we need, that we use on the battlefield, from drones to artillery systems and armed vehicles. And I think joint ventures in these aspects, in this direction, it's beneficial for both sides, and we can share with you the technologies that we use, and that were proven by our soldiers on the battlefield. So I think having the biggest war after the World War II in Europe, now it's definitely changes in the security system now, at least in Europe. But I think it's also in a global scale.
Well, listen, what Yehor is telling us, if I understand it correctly, is that NATO, perhaps at this moment, can learn more from Ukraine than Ukraine can from NATO, but we still have a role to play, right?
It's beneficial for both sides, as I said. So yeah, we can share the technologies, not only the technologies, but also the tactics, how we defend ourselves on the battlefield now in the real conditions. Yeah. And when I can share with you that when our soldiers, which already have the combat experience in this war, come to some of the countries, of the European countries, for trainings, yeah, and share some their experience for those trainers that train on the NATO standards, they learn a lot from our soldiers. So this is,
I have no doubt about
reality.
it, and I understand that some of our defense companies are already present in Ukraine and working with your companies, so I am sure there's more to follow. Miro, you wanted to say something?
Yes, because I completely agree, and the accumulative knowledge and skills of Ukrainian armed forces are of the most of the interest, and we want them on our side. But the question is also how to make the Ukrainian armed forces and Ukraine sustainable. That means there is a need for money, there is a need for support, and that's what someone has to provide. And because we are in a war of attrition, so we have to help Ukraine first of all, and we have to find the resources, because this is the war about not only Ukraine but about the, as I said at the beginning, Putin is not challenging just Ukraine. He's challenging the international order, but mainly the West.
No, you're right, and that raises the painful question. There is, I understand, also the need for manpower. And can we satisfy that need? That's something we don't dare to come too close to.
I want to just also add one thing, because yesterday I was on a Russia panel, and our colleague Teresa was phenomenal and reminded us all that there are a lot of panels on Ukraine and Russia where people forget to mention China. And you know, when you talk about the assault on the international order, President Xi is working with Russia on this, and the Chinese are very happy to see all of us weakened in the context of the war on Ukraine.
I think the Chinese are
well,
happy
you know,
Russia weakened too.
this opens.
And that too, yes.
Yeah.
This opens a broader discussion we don't have time to go into. I mean, the discussion is whether China is an ally of Putin in this conflict, or whether they are triangulating the conflict and they are happy with, you know, the Russians fighting the West, and they can only benefit from them.
Yeah, they are beneficiary.
Yeah.
Now there's
And
weaker
I belong to
Russia
that
on their
school.
border.
But we have a question from the audience.
And very patient.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ivan Djak. I'm Ukrainian from Kherson region. So myself and my family have been very affected by the war. And I see all this discussion happening in the recent year about trying to negotiate peace with Russia. And, you know, we've seen the Russian proposal that very clearly states things that aren't acceptable to the West and to Ukraine. So my question is it even fair to try to sit here and think to negotiate peace with somebody who clearly doesn't want peace? Or does it make more sense to fight on the battlefield and, you know, truly get this war to the end where Ukraine will regain its territory and people by the means of force? Thank you.
So I'm happy to start.
Yes, please.
So first of all, you always have to talk so that you know where your adversary is coming from, so that if there's an opening, a change, you can consider it. But at the end of the day, we know Vladimir Putin. We're not going to talk him into something that's acceptable to us. And so we need to put pressure on the Kremlin, and that means military pressure by supporting Ukraine more than we have so far, and economic pressure, ratcheting up the sanctions, which of course is something that is being considered in Washington again, and Europe continues to make progress on that front. And of course, diplomatic pressure on Putin, isolation, continued recognition of the fact that Russia has violated the Geneva Conventions, the human rights violations, et cetera. So I think, but at the end of the day, negotiation is not going to bring the war to an end in and of itself. You need pressure on, frankly, the Kremlin.
Yeah, well, you know, the question you're asking, Yehor, I will give you precedence.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I totally understand what you're talking about, because I am also from occupied territory. I'm from Berdansk, and my hometown also under occupation, and my parents were forced in the very beginning of this war just leave this city and now live in Kyiv. So, and it's not fair. You are right. It's not fair. But we are in these circumstances when we don't have enough power and enough weapon to go forward, and then from my perspective we should release all the territories and get the control on them. Unfortunately, we don't have now enough power to do it on the battlefield. I have no doubt that our partners have this power, because Russian ability to wage war have two pillars: economy and the military capacity. And economy can be burdened more, and there is so much space with the sanctions on their oil and gas, their metallurgy, their financial sector, et cetera, et cetera. And the Western world, you can do this and can put this burden much more on Russia. Without the economy, without the financing, their army cannot move forward. Second pillar is the capacity, their military capacity, and it's about military response from our side and their rear, with the long-range missiles, with the long-range drones that can destroy their capacity to produce this weapon in their rear. And we do this with the drones, but we do this with our own drones, not without the middle range, for example, missiles like a Tomahawk that we probably could get from the US, or other things, or Tauruses that we have been waiting for 2 years now. So yes, you are right, it's unfair, but we are in these circumstances that we have to start these negotiations, but not for any price.
Karin?
Jump in, because I actually want to build on something Evelyn said earlier that you said we shouldn't talk about, but just going back to the China point, I mean, China and India both all the European countries could put a lot more pressure quietly behind the scenes on both China and India to really put pressure on Putin as well. I mean, I think the more we cut the Russians off at the knees when they try to interfere all over the place, all over the world, the more we stop them from doing that, the more we put pressure on them diplomatically. Even if it's quiet, it doesn't have to be publicly shaming them, but certainly quietly behind the scenes. The Chinese are very interested in their European partnerships. They're interested in the European economy. They don't like war either, actually. And I think the more we all triage on Russia from all different angles, the better it would be as well.
You're right, Karin, but with all due respect, I said we will probably not have the time to go into this
I'm
discussion.
defying you, I'm sorry.
Back to your question. I mean, and I think Yehor already said it, there is the question of what is fair, what is ethical, and there's probably no way to have a fair peace with a country like the Russian today. And then there is the question of whether it's possible to have a hard, ugly peace, which not maybe nice to look at, but will give both sides respite from the war and will bring back some normal life. And unfortunately, these are two very different things. And in many places around the world, we have peace which is holding, but which is not fair by any standard of imagination. There are only two ways historically in which wars end. One side will win, it's one way, or both sides will exhaust themselves so that they have to make peace. And I think in this particular conflict, we hope, and we not only hope, we do our best, or not our best maybe, but we do what we think we can do for the good guys to win, and you know who I think are the good guys. Now, yes,
Yes, thank you, moderator and panelists. So first of all, Slava Ukraina to our Ukrainian friends. Thank you for a great panel. So it was brought up, a really good point. I've been living in Estonia for 10 years, working with a lot of Ukrainians. We aren't kneecapping the Russians everywhere. And I think this is a good follow-up question to your question. Why do you suppose that nobody's just come out and told Vladimir Putin no? Because that's what Ukraine did. They said no. I mean, I'm a former U.S. Marine. I'm very inspired by the courage and bravery, not just of the armed forces, but of the Ukrainian people. So they said no. And I have my own thoughts, but I wanted to turn to the experts why collectively, you know, it was mentioned in one of the questions, why the Trump administration might be overlooking that Europe and the United States together would have the ability to say firmly no and stop what you correctly described, sir, as not just a war against Ukraine, but a war against the post-'89 world order. Thank you.
Well, I suppose this is the question for our American friends.
Well, I mean, if I could just briefly start, it's a very good point. I was in the State Department in September 2015 when the Russians came to Syria and set up shop in Syria. And at the time, some people were saying in the US government, we should tell the Russians, if you leave this airport, we'll bomb you. And we didn't. We just got out of the way. We got out of the way in 2008, in 2014, in 2015. And we totally need to change, but we're not going to get that, unfortunately, with this US government.
But and I agree with what Karin just said, and I was in the Pentagon and involved in those conversations about stopping Syria. And of course, with regard to the invasion and continued occupation of Georgia, we didn't say no. Or if we said no, it wasn't very forceful. And then 2014, we said no, but we didn't take enough action. And President Biden did say no, but again, and President Obama at a certain point said no, but saying no is not enough.
Yeah.
Putin only cares about when you stand up to him with force, you know, when you deter him because you show him that you can cause pain. That's why in the Obama administration, people like me were arguing for providing lethal assistance to Ukraine, because we understood if you give anti-tank weapons to the Ukrainians, they can look at the Kremlin and say, okay, send more Russian troops, and they will go back in a body bag.
And can I just say, they should have listened to Evelyn, but they didn't, unfortunately. I think Evelyn was one of the first people out there making the case. And unfortunately, the government was just too nervous to do that.
Let me ask you, there is now a quite popular idea or rumor in Europe that Trump has finally seen through Putin, or is on the verge of seeing through Putin after so many disappointments, and that he may change tack on how realistic do you think that is?
We have a phrase that we say sometimes in American English, from your lips to God's ears.
And also, hope is not a policy, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, hope is not policy. Well, I have some noises in my headset that's probably telling us that we should about to finish, but we still have a minute to spend. So any famous final words you can leave us with?
Hopefully not famous last words. But the elephant in the room is Russia is a nuclear power, and that's what limited the no. I must say it. I think it's fair to say it, that the fear of escalation to higher level was always the case why there was not a strict no. We cannot turn time back, but I would say that if there would be a different reaction of the West in 2007, 2008, we wouldn't have this situation probably, which give us an instruction that we have to be firm now. And not only with our support to Ukraine, but first of all with our preparedness.
Well, on the dot, and the time is up. Okay, well, let me Yeah,
Maybe
please.
Ukraine can have the last
Maybe
word.
they will allow us. Do it in 20 seconds.
Word, I
Yehor.
just wanted to answer to this guy about no. It's not, you're right, it's not enough just to say no, because Putin understands only the language of power, and he every time tests the limits of the red lines of the Western world. That's why we have to be, again, strong and decisive. And this nuclear threatening will continue, and they will use it every time. But, you know, we destroyed the strategic aviation, 30% of the strategic aviation, which is carrying the nuclear weapon. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
where is the reaction? Where is the it's a good reaction, but not from Russian side. I mean, so we can cross these lines for Russia.
Okay.
Without
Karin,
escalation
one
of
sentence,
weapon.
no. Evelyn. Okay, so let me thank Evelyn, Karin, Yehor, and Miroslav. You were a great panel of speakers, and you were a great audience. And I'm tasked to say, please stay in your seats, because the program continues right away with the section on the topic of Armenia in a shifting world. But that will be already without us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.